Okay, it's the end of the session. This is Holly. Sit. This is Titas. Oh, you stinker, you got one. And this is the roadmap to success. Now, basically, I was primarily called in to work with Holly. Holly does a little bit of growling at the baby. She also jumps up. The dogs also play a little rough. And so, sit. Boy, you're such a good looking girl, and you're such a good looking boy. And so basically we started off the session by talking about exercise. She's a Border Collie mix, and she's got some other stuff in her as well. I have a Border Collie mix at home. They are crazy energy dogs. Now her guardian says she's not a super high energy dog, but they are working dogs, so they have a lot of stamina typically. So right now the family is moving. The house is a little bit in dishevelment right now because the family is moving in a day or two. Sit. To another house, and it has a big fenced-in yard. The yard here is very small. So I look at exercise as an amplifier. It's going to amplify the problems you have, or exercising them is going to make fixing the problems you have easier. So we talked about keeping an exercise journal for a month. Write down the date at the top on a news piece of paper, write each dog's name, and make a column for each one, and then write the time and how many up-downs on the stairs, the time and how many fetches, the time and how long the walk was, the time, the scent games, whatever the things are that you're doing. So the idea for this is we want to journal and keep track of the exercise. Now, when you exercise, remember to do it with an empty stomach the first time and separately. We want to max out each exercise. So one of the first ones I talked about was throwing the treat up and down the stairs. So we touch her nose at the top of the stairs. We throw the treat. When she goes to the bottom of the stairs and licks it up, we call it Mexico, or another fun word that means to go down. And then when she goes back up, you give her another treat, call it like Canada or Aspen or Mountain or whatever you want. Then count that as one. So the first time I do it with an empty stomach, I keep on throwing those treats up and down until the dog's like, you're crazy, I'm not going up there anymore. Now we know what the dog's maximum threshold is. We want to exercise the dog usually about 50 to 75% of that maximum threshold multiple times a day. Dog exercise is best done, it's every 2 to 4 hours. So the exercise journal kind of helps us dial in how much exercise, the number of quantities. Yes, he's scratching himself and grumbling a little bit. Yes. And the number of repetitions. The number of... Very good. Come here. Sit. Now, if I give the dogs a treat for barking, then or while they're barking, that's what I'm giving us to do. Sit. So I'm doing is I'm redirecting them into doing something else and then saying sit. So they had to do something else to get that reward. We'll talk about what they were doing there in a second. So getting back to exercise, the idea is to keep on. That was her trying to correct him. So basically what the idea is we want to play around with those elements. And when something like that happens, I want the guardians to interpret that as the dog's way of saying, I have too much energy right now. Can you deplete it? Because right now I think that that both dogs are expecting each other to exercise them. There's also cats in the house. One of the cats they listen to, the other one they like to chase. And again, I think that's a correlation of not having enough exercise. So the exercise journal, we do the up-downs on the stairs. We can have them... She's not good at chasing the laser. Some dogs, they shouldn't chase the laser because they get too amped up. Might be okay for him. When you exercise them, the first time, exercise them independently. And the other ones I do is fetch. Throw the fetch, and I keep on throwing until the dog just says, I'm not going to get it anymore. Now you know, okay, that was 48 times. So now we know what the threshold is. Then we're going to exercise them 50 to 75%. We're not sure exactly how much that's going to be and how often. So the idea is at first maybe we do it every 4 hours. And we go and we do 50 to 75% of it, or maybe start at 50%. And then at the end of the day, we give each dog a letter grade, A through F. The dog did anything other than an A grade. The next day, I play around with the elements. I might add a couple extra games of fetch or repetitions, a couple throws, or I might do a whole extra do it. Instead of ever doing every 3 hours or 4 hours, maybe we do it every 3 hours or 2 hours. The idea with the exercise journal is it gives us data so we can start looking. Every time that they have a barking episode at the door, I look at the chart or the journal. It's been longer than 3 hours since they've been exercised. So once we figure out what the interval is, then we can actually, and that might be different for each dog. Maybe for Holly, she needs to be exercised every 2 hours and 45 minutes. Maybe Titans can go every 4 hours. So the idea is to plot that into our schedule. Throwing the treats on the stairs or playing fetch or the scent games, those are pretty easy. They shouldn't take longer than a couple of minutes. 5 minutes of throwing the treats up and down the stairs is equivalent to like a half an hour to a 45-minute walk. So if we can get the dogs a proper amount of exercise, I think it's really going to help a lot of the behavior problems we have. It's not going to fix them, but it's going to make fixing them much easier. We also talked about rules. Now, I found out I was a little embarrassed because I've worked with a client before with a different dog, but it was so long ago. I've worked with about 4,000 dogs at this point. I've forgotten. But basically, they already had some rules from one of my first sessions when I started doing this years ago. We talked about other rules that we can incorporate. Some of the examples are making sure that the humans are eating before they feed the dog. All you have to do is eat 5 bites of a chip or a cracker and then give the dogs permission to eat. I would invite you to go to my website, doggonproblems.com, click on Dog Training Tips, and on the page that loads, either on the right side of the page or the bottom of the page, there's a search box. Type in structured feeding, and it'll explain a video of how I teach dogs to wait for permission to eat and feed them one at a time. Eating is a very important activity for dogs, so if we have dominion over that, that really helps. Other rules would be not being allowed to be in the kitchen when we're preparing food, or around 7 feet around anybody who's eating food, having to sit before we let them in or out of a door. Remember, walk away, say sit once. If they don't sit within 3 seconds, walk away, sit down somewhere, wait 1 minute, then go back to the door and do it again and give the dog a command again. This time, if it doesn't sit, I'd walk away for 2 minutes, then 4 minutes, then 8 minutes, keep double the length of time. Eventually, when you go and say sit, the dog sits, fly the door up and let him go outside. Now, the next stage, once the dogs are sitting at every door as their way of asking to go outside, which is what will happen, you can actually teach dogs to wait at the door. And that's actually something else. You can search in doggonproblems.com and search for wait at door. And there'll be a video of me doing with other dogs where it explains how to do it. They also get very excited and like to jump up on people. So honey jumping is another video I'd like you to look for on my website. And it'll show you how to teach your dogs to learn themselves that being calm gets them rewards, and being excited causes the humans to move away. It's a form of operant conditioning. It's very powerful. It takes a lot of repetition, but it's pretty easy. Let me see other rules. Let me see. When the humans, like I said, are eating, they shouldn't be within 7 feet of the humans who are eating. The humans here don't let them on the furniture. That's one of the rules I usually incorporate. That's awesome. The guardian just taught the dog to communicate it up. Now she's coming back up. Turn around. But basically, the more that we incorporate these rules and structure, when one dog is eating, the other dog should not be within 7 feet. And we're going to feed the dogs one dog at a time. The video will explain how to do that and why that's important. But it's a very important activity for dogs. All right. Now, there's a window over here. The family's moving to a new house, but they keep the blinds closed because the dogs, as you heard earlier, bark like crazy when anybody's walking in front of the house, and that becomes a self-rewarding behavior. So a lot of times what we do is we call it Roman blinds. Come. Good job, buddy. Yes. Roman blind is basically where we put a paper or something to block the visual acuity at the bottom of the window, not the top. Dogs are shorter than what we are. So we put maybe the bottom 3 foot, 4 foot of the window, depending on how high the window is. The dog goes to the window, it can't see out. If you just use white paper, put it on the outside of the, so the dog can't scratch it off the window. And then every time the dog goes to the window, it can't get reinforced of wanting to go outside or seeing anything outside. It just sees white. We can still see because we're taller than them. It still lets sunlight in. But this way, every time the dog goes to the window, it doesn't give it the opportunity to see what they're barking at, and that'll help them get out of that habit. Now, the video above talked about growling. We don't want to correct a dog for growling. We want to actually create a positive association for that. Very good. Guardians are eating a little bit of a snack. They have to head out, and one of the dogs wanted to go in the kitchen, and they just gave a couple of warnings, and the dogs laid down outside the boundary, basically what we just did in the video above. So when the dog's nuisance or barking or those sort of things, put that in your exercise journal, but again, interpret that as the dog's way of saying, I have too much energy. So take them outside and exercise. I also showed the guardians how to let the dogs out of the kennel in a very calm way. So we went to the kennel, and they were both very excited. I waited. He got calm first, so I walked over to his kennel. I reached for the handle. He started wiggling. I pulled my hand back. Waited for him to calm down. Didn't give me any commands. When he got calm, I reached again. I had to go back and forth like this about 10 times. Eventually, he realized as soon as I start wiggling, he stops the process. So he just stayed calm. And I was able to jiggle it. Then I jiggled a lot, and he got up, and I stopped again. And then I kept on doing that, and eventually I opened it up, but didn't unlocked it, but didn't open it. Then eventually I opened it, and I stepped in there. And the dog had just learned, I'm not allowed to exit the kennel until I'm very calm and the human gives me permission to exit the kennel. All right, look for ways to delay gratification as well. When the dog brings you the ball and fetch, tell it to sit. And only after it sits, pick it up and throw it. Or I make it sit, drop first before you pick it up, and then drop and sit, and then drop, sit, and wait for me to say release. So incorporating delayed gratification is a great way for the dog to help practice that. Now, I'm just seeing something here, so I'm going to talk to you guys about it. You're in the kitchen right now. But basically, one of the dogs the guardians were trying to keep out of the room, but the other dog was in the room. Holly was in and he was out. So make sure it's consistent. And again, if you have two-way goes, the dog can get to that room from multiple ways. Put a chair or something to block it, so that way the dogs can't go and do an end round, run around you. That was great. They both exited and they're both laying down outside the boundary. Now, I also went over teaching the dogs to leave the room. Remember, just take one treat with one dog at a time, tear it in half, be in the doorway of a room, throw the treat 3 feet outside the room. When the dog goes outside the room and licks it up, say the word out. It'll come back, do it a second time. Then do that for every doorway in that or portal in the house. Doesn't have to be necessarily a doorway. It could also be the area around the dining room table. So you teach the dog to move away. So keep on doing that until, and then once you've done all the rooms in the house, then you repeat the process, but this time I throw the treat into the room and I say the name of the room: kitchen, dining, living, bed, whatever it is. So now I create a vocabulary. I teach the dog to leave the room or to come into the room. Now, the primary things the guardians were worried about is the growling. We talked about that in the video above. But another cool exercise the guardians can do, I would use a clicker for this. And so basically, if you use a clicker, you need to prime the clicker first. So what you do is, with each dog separately, have a clicker ready to go, throw a treat on the ground. When the dog licks it up, click immediately after the treat goes in the mouth. Do that for about 10 treats in a row. And then, so throw, click, throw, click. After a while, the click becomes synonymous with having a treat in the mouth. And the click is to indicate you just did exactly what I wanted. So the exercise for this, we have to prime the clicker first. And I would just sit here with a clicker and have some treats nearby, but don't have them in your hand. And have the child sitting in the room, just hanging out without any food. And the dog comes up and checks her out, and which she will, or he will, either one. And then as soon as the dog turns and moves more than 4 feet away, click, and give the dog a treat and say a word that means to move away from the child. And again, I like using fun command words to maybe say flee or distance or boundaries or manners, whatever you want to say. So every time the dog moves away from the child, it hears the click and knows that I just did something right, and then I get a reward after, and I hear the word manners after the treat's in my mouth. Remember, always give the treat first, say the word after. So after a while, when the child does have some food or something that the parents don't want, they could say, distance or border or whatever it is, and the dog moves away because it's been rewarded for doing that. It takes a little bit of practice at a time when you don't need to do it, but after a while you'll be able to say away or whatever the word is, and the dog voluntarily, gleefully moves away from the child. And right now when Holly growls, I think that's her way of saying you're too close. Well, the other option for her, if she's not comfortable with how close the baby is, she can turn and walk away from the baby, but dogs don't think about that. So we have to kind of help spike the punch for that, and that's where this little exercise I just got done talking about will come in handy. And that's a great way to just get some distance away from the child. We also talked about passive training and petting with a purpose. Passive training is waiting for the dog to organically offer the behavior on its own. Every time they drink water, say the word agua. Every time they eat food, come up with a different word for each dog's, but they say sushi for one and Dario's for the other one. So for 3 months, every time that Holly takes a bite of food, she hears the word sushi right after she takes her first bite of food. When Titas hears sushi, there's no food in his mouth, so the command word doesn't mean anything to him, but to her, it means I get to eat. So you can use that for anything. Every time the dog comes to you, pet it and say come. Every time it lays down, pet it and say crash. Every time it sits, pet it and say sit. Every time it moves away, say flee or whatever the word is you want to use. So by creating these command words and rewarding the dog when they voluntarily offer you those behaviors without any influence from you, the dog's going to be more inclined to want to offer those behaviors in the future. Now that leads me to, and I use the word testify, but you can use any word you want. Testify means, oh, you just missed an opportunity for the dog to pet. So if somebody says testify, I look at the dog, if it's standing right here, I pet it and say come. Because I assume that's what he came for, what they're recognizing or reminding me, can't even speak right now, that I want to reward. Dog sits, pet it and say sit. Lays down, pet it and say crash or chill or whatever your word is. And try to pet under the chin. You can pet anywhere you want, just avoid patting on top of the head. That creates a down nose orientation. Dogs feel proud, their nose is in the air, so that's why I prefer to pet on the chin to facilitate that nose up. Petting with a purpose is if the dog comes up and the dogs do come and paw at the humans. So what I would do is when the dogs paw, also one other thing for Holly, when I reach to pet her, she would keep on reaching up almost to shake or to put her paw on me. So as soon as she reached her paw up, I stopped reaching to pet her. I kept doing this back and forth, and eventually she kept pausing her, and then I continued. So that teaches her paws on the ground equals the petting continues, paw comes up, the petting stops, or attempt to pet. So for petting with a purpose is if they come up and paw at you, give them a counter order. Tell them to sit. Tell them to lay down. Come down and sit over here if they're already sitting on this side. So they have to do something to change their state. And as soon as they do that, then we say the word, whatever the command word is, sit, come, whatever it is. So now we're telling the dog, if you do something a human asks, you get rewarded. If you do something, you tell the human what to do, they're not going to listen to you and you're not going to get a reward. After a while, the dog will come start sitting in front of you to prepay for that attention. Now, I use the word paycheck for petting with a purpose. So if somebody comes in the room and sees I'm petting the dog and stand, they say paycheck, I stop petting, tell the dog to sit. When it sits, I pet it on the chin and say sit. When I say, actually, I asked the dog to sit and you didn't see it right, blah, 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 blah. But if I argue right away, then the dog's like, they're on different pages. He's on one page, she was on one page, and then I can be on my own page as a dog. But if the people are say paycheck, they stop petting, the dog's like, they're on the same page. I'm the outlier. I better get with them. So even if you want to pet your dog, make sure that you ask it to sit or do something to earn that affection. So I use paycheck for petting with a purpose, and I say testify, but you use any words for rewarding desired behaviors. And named all your individual toys, anything your dog does on a regular basis, just reward it. All right, if you get in a habit of petting with a purpose of passive training, every time you pet your dog, it becomes a micro training session that boosts the dog's self-esteem because it's earning that pet. It increases the dog's respect for you as the authority figure because it's asking you versus telling you. And it helps it practice sitting and the other behaviors that we find desirable. The more that the dog gets petted for sitting, the more it's going to come and sit in front of you as a way of asking for attention. And we call that manding or learning to mand. Let me see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We went over the 4 escalating consequences to disagree with unwanted behaviors. And we also went over a leave it exercise and a focus exercise. These are both things you can find on our website. And I would suggest you find those exercises on our website and not elsewhere because we teach them a little bit differently, but we use dog psychology. So the way that we teach has an auxiliary benefit. The focus exercise stops the production of stress and the stress hormone. The leave it exercise is just really kind of the way we set it up is a little bit different. So, and the focus exercise, because I did see that both of them kind of were a little twitchy and jumpy. If you see a dog really twitchy, that often means they have cortisol, which is the stress hormone in their blood. So the focus exercise, if you find out how to do that, go find a video on our website and practice that. If you see your dog is jumpy and twitchy like that, take it off to the side away from whatever it's reacting to and play focus that game a little bit, and you can actually help stop production of cortisol and make the dog start feeling good about itself. Now, one last little tip. Anytime your dog misbehaves or is naughty or doesn't behave the way that you want, ask yourself, have I taught the dog how it should behave in that situation? If we haven't, recreate the situation in the easiest version possible when you're not distracted. We have a family with a young one. When the young one's out, that's where the priority and the emphasis and the focus is going to be. So try to schedule some times where, the baby's asleep or somebody's walking the baby and we practice with the dog separately. So practice one dog at a time, break the activity down in individual steps of the easiest version possible and help the dog practice step 1 over and over and over again. Don't go to step 2. Just keep on doing step 1 until the dog is automatically behaving the way that you want for step 1. Only then move to step 2 and teach it how it's supposed to behave for step 2. So you do all the individual steps in the easiest version possible when you're not actually doing the actual act of the item or the activity. Then eventually, when the dog, we have a young one that might come over here. That's all right, she can come in. But basically, we've taught the dog how to behave throughout the whole activity. Then we bring it back and we put all the steps together again in the easiest version possible. And then we gradually start making it more and more realistic until we get to the real world situation and the dog behaves how we want because we've taught them how to behave. Most of the time when people say they have a naughty dog, I ask them if they've taught the dog how to behave, and it's the first time it ever occurred to them. Now, the exercise is also going to be a big factor in this house. So remember, if we're going to have guests come over, exercise the dogs beforehand. If you want to go for a walk, exercise the dogs beforehand. When you do this exercise, make sure they get about 10 minutes to recover. They should stop. Now I'm ready to go again. So I would recommend that you exercise before things where you know they're going to be excited or you have guests come over or something that they're not going to perform well to set them up for success. Now, we talked about the escalating consequences. The fourth of those is putting the dog on a leash timeout. These dogs do not wear collars because they got kind of tangled up and the guardian doesn't want them to wear collars except for specific reasons, which is fine. But that means that we're not going to be able to attach a leash to the dog's collar. So what I would do is get a martingale collar If you can't find one, message me. I live in the neighborhood. I can come by and drop one off. But a martingale collar is going to be able to easily slip over each dog's head. And I would recommend that you have a leash and a collar in every room that you hang out in. So if their dogs are misbehaving and you get to that fourth consequence, you don't have to go across the house to get your collar. There's one in each room. So you go over where it is, pull it out, put it on the dog's head, step on it, and you wait until that dog settles down. And again, it should lie down completely on its own accord. Remember, don't let it drag the leash around unsupervised. And then one last thing, practice going to the new nursery at times and reading, eating snacks, opening up the butt paste, all the rest of those different things that the guardians are going to have when the new baby comes around, so the dogs practice not going into that room. Since it's a new house, if you start that on day one and the dogs never go in there, they're going to be better prepared for it. I'm trying to train one of my dogs to be a service dog, well, just so I know how to train service dogs. So we take him to restaurants a lot, and people always think I'm mean because I don't let him have food. He doesn't know what the food tastes like because I've never let him do that. So there's no forbidden fruit. He just doesn't know what he's missing. In this case, if the dog never gets to go in that room, that just becomes the normal thing. I just don't ever go in that room. That way mom can go in there and feed and change poopy diapers, all the stuff that she needs to do. All right, Titus, Holly, sit. This is Titus, this is Holly, and this is their roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it. Good job.